And
Sure.
Hi, everyone. This is Marlene.
Oh, hi, Marlene.
Yeah, hi. Okay, I'll put my video on too. Hi.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm in my kitchen. Yeah, good to see you. I don't like the looks of my. All right. So I am from Rice Lake, Wisconsin. I'm a past district governor, and I've been involved with youth exchange. My son went to Germany as a short-term exchange student, but we've had several youth exchange students stay at various houses in my community. So let's see. Currently, I'm working on the Operation Pollination, Environmental and Sustainability Rotary Action Group, and excited about the new changes that are coming on with that in the National Heritage Parks that are all across the United States. So excited about those things.
That's great. I have not heard about that, Marlene, and I'm wondering if on a future meeting, maybe we could do a short little blurb, not a full speaker, but maybe pair you up with somebody else and hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Tomorrow morning, we're having a meeting on just getting the website. The website's up and running, but it's not, it needs to be interactive. And so hopefully we'll have a whole lot more available to you.
Sure.
It really fits in well now with what's happening to our food supply and how everything is going. And who would have ever thought?
Who would have ever thought? That's right.
Ever thought.
Thanks for being here. Nice to see you.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me. I am so excited that you guys, Chris-Ann and Greg and you, John, have created and used this venue that we started so long ago. It just makes my heart blossom. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for.
And yeah, for people on the call that don't know, Marlene, while she was past district governor, really had a goal of getting this e-club up and running, although it was not focused on youth exchange at the time, but took us years, but we got there. So thanks for all of the, really, we wouldn't be here without the many years of work with you and Kirk. And just, it's a real tribute to stick-to-itness, as they say. And, you stick with something long enough and it comes together.
Yeah. And the fact that it existed so you could pop in and you could get this far is just over the top amazing. Thank you for doing that.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. So thanks everyone for any other comments? Thought someone may have said that. Okay, very good. Well, thanks for joining today. We do have one announcement here, and that is the District 5960 push for $400,000 for the Rotary Annual Fund. And I just want to turn it over to Paul for a bit here to talk about the fund and the goal. And we're basically a brand new reformulated Rotary Club in an e-format. So how should we participate? Can we participate? So yeah, tell us about a bit about the fund, and apologies to those who know everything there is to know about the annual fund already. But for those of us who don't, thanks for saying a few words.
Sure, thank you. Obviously, the Rotary Foundation is my charity of choice. My wife, Susan, her charity of choice as well. And we give regularly. We are Paul Harris Society members, which means we give at least $1,000 per year, or we commit to that, and we do have that all set up. But we give to it because we see all the great things that we're able to do through the Rotary Foundation, and it's things that our club does, Prior Lake Rotary Club, other clubs in our district, but really worldwide, all the things we do. So when we give to the Rotary Foundation, they invest that, and in 3 years, half of that money comes back to our district as district designated funds, and that's what goes towards things like our Peace Scholars and our district grants, our global grants. We have so many active clubs in our district doing projects in their communities and throughout the world. And we can't do all the good without each of us giving, to the Rotary Foundation. And so that's why we give. And we believe so much in this that yesterday we committed to be beneficiary and or be part of the Bequest Society, and so we commit to giving after we pass money towards the Rotary Foundation, and it just it means so much that even when we're gone, that we have a legacy through the Rotary Foundation, and it's just all the great things we do. And unfortunately, we can't fund all the projects that come forward through the district because we need to give to do. So, it's something that the more we give, the more we're able to do. And it's the impact that we do with those dollars and everything. Michael, you mentioned Polio Plus. We have our Polio Plus fund as well. And that number, the 317, I can update you. It's over 330,000 now. And you see the push towards 40,000. So it's really easy to give through the Rotary Foundation, the Rotary International website. If you've got a My Rotary account, you can donate that way. And of course, the year ends June 30th. So I'm happy if you have any other questions about the foundation, you can reach out to me anytime after the meeting. And I love to talk about the Rotary Foundation and how special it is to myself and Susan. So,
Paul, thanks so much for that. I didn't know personally much of that. So for the members on the call, I'll be sending something out and we can figure out how we can get our name added to the 5960 list, realizing we are, we're not the number 9 club. Exactly. So, we'll start small this year and we'll build from there. So thanks very much. I just wanted to ask you one more thing, Paul, with 3 weeks left to go here, if my calendar is correct, in your district governorship, any final words for us here to think about in your last month?
Well, obviously what I've told the presidents, including yourself, is we want to finish strong. We've got our awards program that wrapped up, and we have many clubs that participate in that. That was the 3rd year. We have a happy hour that's going on, I think in a couple weeks, 2 weeks from yesterday, to kind of celebrate that and, just kind of see what all the clubs did. We continue with our Friday features, District 5960 Friday features, every Friday at 9 a.m. on Zoom. And this week we have a special, well, they're all special and they're all different. This week we have Private First Class RYLA, who was from Minnesota, and he was in World War II. And it was a project done, one of the teachers had a student and they kind of paired up and did this project. But I watched it. They had it, the presentation at North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale, and I watched that yesterday and it was really moving. And so tune in on Friday for that. But, we have other, Emma, she had presented. She'll be coming in July and doing the same presentation, so that she did such a wonderful job, Emma Mulhern. And so we continue that, and just looking forward to District Governor-elect Ed Merrick taking over. His installation will be on June 30th. Now, everything's changed, so nothing in person. We're gonna record the whole thing, and but it'll be a different celebration, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to his year. I think it's gonna be a great year. I'll continue to be involved as I can, and doing a little more with my club. I'll get back to that, but
Well,
just
thanks for all you do and really for the tremendous support of both Youth Exchange and of the C Club. You know, I think we were thrilled when you attended the first meeting, surprised when you attended the second, and really surprised when you kept attending. It's just great to have you here, and I hope, you know, as your DG-ship ends, that you'll consider joining us every once in a while, or just continue it. Yeah, very good.
One other thing, and that's for next week. We have to plug that. We had it in our around the district promoting next week's program. Am I getting ahead of you?
Yep, that's okay, but go ahead. Yep.
So Melanie DeLuca, who's the chair for the North Star Youth Exchange, she'll kind of be presenting the year, what's gone on, and boy, what a year.
What a year.
I've been on a couple of meetings with her and emails that she kept sending out about what was all going on, and it was crazy. And to get through all that, I mean, it's just it'll be worthwhile to hear what happened, and then also to look at what the future holds for Youth Exchange and North Star Youth Exchange. So please get with your network and invite people, and hopefully we'll get 100 or more people. I don't know, but we got a ways to go. So please promote it.
Thanks very much. And am I remembering, do you have to sign up for next week's meeting ahead of time, or is it just an open link?
It is a pre-registration. So
okay. Could you, if you would you put that into the chat?
Absolutely.
And yeah, with that, there's some other parts of the meeting that I'll just pass over until next week. And with that, I'd like to introduce this week's speaker, Sarah Tuberty. And I'm just really excited to hear her and hear the presentation, hear about her exchange, and kind of her life, and what we can all learn from her. You're muted.
I knew better than that.
There we
so
go.
Funny. All right, ciao, and benvenuti a Lago di Como. This is a picture I took, and I felt it was really appropriate to put as the background, which is fun. And I also happened to be at my parents' house, so guess what I found? My jacket.
Right.
Someone put that on.
Love it.
And so this was fun, looking through all my stuff and getting that back out. So, all right, I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Let's see, share. Here we go. Okay. And then you are seeing that, yes, okay. There's a presentation button, right? I had it on my other one. Let me see. All right. Okay, so welcome. This is a presentation both sort of about my congenital limb difference and then on my experiences in being an exchange student. I am from the Vacaville Noon Rotary Club, which is in Vacaville, California. It is sort of in between Sacramento and San Francisco. We're in district, it's 5160. I mixed up the numbers there, so I apologize for that. And then I was able to travel to Lecco, Italy, which is on Lake Como, which is the same lake that George Clooney lives on in northern Italy. And it is, as you can sort of tell by this picture, just incredibly stunning. And this is a photo that's taken from downtown Lecco looking out onto the lake. So the city exists right on the lake too, which is lovely. Okay, and then a little bit more about myself. At this moment, I have just graduated from an occupational therapy program at Boston University. So I do have a doctorate in occupational therapy. I also, for the past 7 years, have worked as a flight attendant, which sort of fun segue. I was able to get that job with sort of a connection and a recommendation through one of my best friends on my exchange student trip. She ended up being a flight attendant about a year before I was, and I was looking for jobs and different things to do, and she had recommended that. So I sort of followed her lead. And then I also, when I was in graduate school, had started to engage in the aerial arts, and the aerial arts are anything that's sort of suspended from the ceiling. So it's the lyra, the trapeze, the silks, which are the sort of two fabrics that come down. So this image here is me on a performance that's in the silks. And then I also have a podcast called Disarming Disability. And we sort of bring on different experts that have done research within the disability world, and we sort of interview them and have sort of candid conversations just to broaden the information as far as what's happening from that sort of, higher level sort of collective experience on how we can build a more inclusive society based on, sort of broadening the perceptions of disability. I have a pretty strong Rotary history. My mother was a Rotarian. She joined the Vacaville Noon Rotary Club when I was about 8 years old. And at 8, I knew that I was going to be a Rotarian when I was older. So I just continued to be involved in all of the Rotary programs. And I love, as all of you are in it for, I think, very similar reasons, but I just loved the emphasis on building better communities and really just about good people doing good work that needs to be done. And it's not about sort of how flashy we are or, and I liked that we could partner with different organizations in other countries. And it really is, what does that country need? What does that community need? What do those members need, versus like, oh, great, how we just walked into another country and helped out. So I really like the sustainability. I like that it doesn't have the religious or political affiliations with it. So those are just, I love all of it. So I was a president in my Interact club in high school, and then I did my Rotary Youth Exchange, and then I was in Rotex afterwards as well for a few years up into college. And then in graduate school, I held leadership positions, both vice president and president of my Rotaract club at the Boston University. And then from there, really started getting involved in attending the international conferences and gave presentations to youth exchange officers at the pre-convention in Germany last year about diversity and inclusion, as far as how we can be, welcoming to that if our exchange students do have, disabilities and things like that too. And then I did an event at the zone level, and we sort of have this picture here with Ian Risley, past President Ian Risley, who came, and I was working on the Rotary Now program, which is really trying to help bridge Rotaractors to then becoming Rotarians, and particularly the older Rotaractors, and sort of encouraging them to transition over to Rotary before they age out, just so that we can get some of that, just why not be in Rotary longer? So I am excited to share that in February, I joined the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley. So now I am an official Rotarian, which is really exciting. So full circle from my little dream I knew at 8. And then just more about sort of another part of myself. I have a congenital limb difference. So I was born without, and that means that I was born sort of without fingers on my left hand is what my limb different looks like. I like the terminology limb difference more than sort of like missing or lacking. There's a variety of different medical terms that are sort of used to describe my hand, but it doesn't totally fit underneath a specific diagnosis. I think my birth records just say aphalangia, which essentially means like no fingers, or the sort of like endpoints. There's also hypoplasia is another word that has been used to describe my hand, and that just is like an underdevelopment of organs and tissues. There's also symbrachydactyly was a word that was associated for a moment, but may not fit on the diagnostic criteria. Ultimately, I don't know why my hand looks like this. I don't know sort of where that came from. I don't know, none of us really know any result. The best theory that they have right now, sort of looking at a variety of animal models that researchers are doing, is that there was some type of problem with my blood flow with my subclavian artery, and that happened during 8 weeks of gestation, and that sort of just disrupted blood flow on my arm as it was forming. I never had fingers, so I didn't lose them. That's another type of congenital limb difference, but my particular one, my fingers just never formed. It just sort of stopped. So and then I had a variety of surgeries when I was little, just to sort of adapt the function of it to see, what that would look like. So I was able to create, surgeons at Shriners Hospital in Northern California was able to separate out my thumb from the rest of my palm to be able to create something that I could pinch on. So that has been really helpful. But ultimately, I don't know what happened to my hand. And this is more common than I thought. The best research that we have right now, just because it's really hard to count all of these, is that 1 in every 10,000 live births has a limb difference. And I think that's particularly to upper limb. So there's a lot of us out there, but not enough that I would have had somebody else in any of my school systems or would have seen anybody else growing up. So these are just pictures, but now as an adult, I was 19 when I found my first person that I met in real life that had a limb difference. And then there's sort of a bunch of us together. So these are other girls. Right now we're standing in front of those toilet paper, not toilet paper, the paper towel things that say pull down with both hands. So we're both like, oh, we can't because we don't have two hands. So yeah, it's fun. This is important for my story because particularly growing up without access to being able to see anybody else who had a hand difference like mine, I didn't see anybody in the movies. I mean, the only person I saw in a movie with a hand difference was Captain Hook, which isn't a particularly favorable character. So there's a heavy social stigma against people with any type of difference. And I didn't really experience a lot of the negativity as like a young kid. I was a pretty extroverted little kiddo. You see that sort of picture of me there smiling. And then naturally in development, at about 8 years old, kids start looking to the external world to sort of figure out how do they fit into the world, who they are as they're developing their self-concept. So at 8, then I started really listening to the messages that I was experiencing and then trying to see how I fit into that larger social structure. And the messages weren't favorable. And that's also the same time that I changed schools. So initially my peer group, I was part of it was normal that I had a hand difference. It was, I had brown hair and green eyes and my hand looked different. Like that is just sort of what everybody had grown up knowing. But then I changed school systems and I was with kids who had no idea who I was. They hadn't really seen anybody with a limb difference before. And they were very sort of taken back by it. So then I sort of show that I became this introverted teen. This is an image from a play that I was in that's a little dramatic, but important for emphasis. And then I popped this slide in here too. This is one that I had made for another event that I was doing. And these are some of the messages that people have said to my face as I was growing up. So if you can only imagine the things that people are saying, not directly to me. So this, I have this picture in the bottom left here. I'm about 8 years old in that picture, probably 8 or 9. So this girl, as she's trying to figure out who she is in the world, was just hearing all of these messages and really seeing that this is not a favorable trait. And really sort of then I believed them, which is sort of called internalized ableism, if you will. So I believed these things about myself and I didn't think that I was worthy of things at all, and became very nervous and very self-conscious and really engaged in concealment behavior. So I would start hiding my hands sort of desperately anytime anyone would try to, I want to make friends or try interacting with anyone, I would really hide my hand because I wanted them to know who I was before they saw my hand, rather than sort of being scared off by my hand because it had become my normal and my expectation that people would not want to hang out with me or talk to me when I had a hand that sort of looked like mine. And even when I did start my new school, I would try to go up and, ask or like trying to make friends with kids in the class. And I would have to go up to them on the playground and ask if I could play with them. And a lot of the times they said no. So just really feeling that like not great self-esteem or self-image or self-concept, and really sort of built myself in the society that I was sort of this like less than or subhuman. And then my mom had taken me to a district event in our sort of area. And I didn't want to go, but, I was 13, so I couldn't drive myself anywhere else. And so I remember sitting there and there's this girl from Colombia who was an inbound exchange student. And I sat and talked to her the entire time and just thought it was the coolest thing, to the point where my mom was ready to go, but I wasn't, which was so funny because I didn't want to go to this event to begin with. And, I asked my mom if that's something that I would be able to do, and she made it happen. And then I ended up restarting the exchange program in Vacaville in 2006, and 2007 is when I went. So this is just an image. So Lecco was sort of north of Milan here, up in the Italian Alps. We lived right on a lake. This image here is in downtown Lecco. And then on the other side of these buildings is a waterfront walk. So it's just like this cute courtyard with all these lovely restaurants, and you can see the Alps are here in the background. And then this is the first image that I took. This is the first picture of me when I first arrived at my first host family. And then again, this is just another gorgeous picture. And I'm actually standing on the bridge that's in the back of the Mona Lisa. If you're familiar with that, there's a bridge, I think in the back right corner, that has arches that are all different sizes or widths. That is in the Mona Lisa, and that bridge exists, it's real, and it's in Lecco. So I'm standing on that bridge taking this picture, which I just think is kind of fun. These are my host families. I stayed with 2 on the trip that I was there, and there's 4 Rotary Youth Exchange students that were in our town, and then 4 outbound students. So we just lived in the families of the students that were the outbound. My first family was the Chilios. They were a very loud and vibrant Italian family. I remember coming down from upstairs and I was just hearing all of this yelling, and they were like screaming at each other. So I came downstairs to see what was sort of happening. And my host mother, Belinda, was, telling her sons to clean up their clothes. And as soon as I walked down, everyone's like, "Oh, hi, Sarah, how are you?" Which was just so funny because my family is not a very loud family in that sense. And I have a sister. So to go from one sister in my first family I had 3 brothers that were all sort of surrounding me. So that was just new and fun. And then my youngest brother, Roberto, he was 12 when I was 16. And again, sort of having my limb difference, sometimes cutting food can be really hard, like cutting meats is a little difficult for me. So he would always make sure that my food was cut, like both him and my host mom would sort of help adapt different things for me. And of course, when you get the Italian pizzas, you don't eat it in pizza slices. You cut out, a little bit and you put it on your fork and eat it. So they're very fork and knife adept. So they're doing that all the time. So they would cut my pizzas for me. And I just thought that was really cute. And then this is my second host family down here on the bottom. They're the Polvaras, and they lived in downtown Lecco on top of the shops that were downtown. And they were a very different family. They were very quiet and professional. They're both of the parents were accountants. And so that was just fun to sort of have that contrast. And the Chilios lived further out in Lecco, so I'd have to take buses to go to school. Whereas with the Polvaras, I could just walk to school, which was really fun. And they're both really lovely. I keep in contact with all of them. And then I was able to go back and visit my family at my 10-year anniversary. I sort of went and was able to spend time with them, which is fun. And then this is my school here to the right with other exchange students. We learned Italian through our Rotary host club. They organized Italian lessons for us. So we sort of sat in the library, and then we met up with AFS. They had, I think, 10 students in Italy. So some of those students came, or in Lecco. So some of the students came, and we worked together. So one of my my really good friends here, Martina, is from Norway, and we have maintained really good contact. I've gone and visited her in Norway. She's come to the States to see me, which is really lovely. And I went to Italy not knowing any Italian, so that was fun to learn that. This is my school. So this is a picture for me when I went back a couple years ago. My school is called Bertacchi, and the way that Italy organizes schools, I think sort of similar to other European countries, is that when you enter secondary education, you have to test into what type of school you can then attend. And in Italy, they have the classics, which sort of goes they learn lots of Greek and Latin, and that is foundational for any type of law profession or professor type profession. Or you could go into linguistics, which they're learning lots of different languages. And then you could go into a trade school, or you could go into a math and sciences school. So there was already the connection with our Rotary Club. So I didn't need to choose which school I went to. They had sort of assigned us to the language school of Bertacchi. And my class was Terza LB. So it was the 3rd year and the linguistics program. And it was interesting because we were the same cohort. And this once all the students tested in to the school, they would become part of a class, and they would stay with that same class of 30 or so students throughout their entire secondary education. And they would stay in the classroom, and then the teachers would rotate into the classroom to teach the different courses that they had. And it was a set curriculum. And if students didn't pass the curriculum, then they had to stay for summer school in order to make up the classes that they had missed. So it was language heavy. I was taking German and Italian, and I was taking Spanish and Italian, and it was incredibly difficult. And that's sort of when I realized I'm more of a math brain and I like formulas, that I had a really hard time with languages because they don't really follow formulas. So, and our class was a majority of them were female. So this is our classmates here. So they had an exchange student the year prior to me being in the class who was from the United States. And it was a man, I believe his name was like Pete or something like that. And they all loved, or Patrick, and they all loved Patrick. So they were excited that they were going to get another boy exchange student from America. But then, you know, they had me, which was fun. But I'm still friends with some of my classmates as well. And the neat thing about taking classes in Italy is that we would go on field trips, and I was taking an art history course and we were learning about the Last Supper, and then we just hopped on a bus and went and saw the Last Supper. Like, that's nothing that I had ever really experienced that degree in my California education. So I just thought that was amazing to be like, wow, these are images I'm used to looking at art history books that I just thought were sort of like so old and so far away, but then to just hop on a bus and go see them was just an incredibly beautiful thing. And we traveled around a lot, where we were so far north in Italy that like Switzerland was right there. And I went on a class field trip to Germany. We went to go look at art museums in Germany and different structures there. So we stopped in Austria, and that's where this picture is downtown. And then my second host family wanted to go on a spring break trip. The Povares wanted to go on a spring break trip to Barcelona. So I turned 17 in Barcelona, and that's sort of a picture from there, which is fun. And then the Rotary clubs organized, our district organized a whole district youth exchange meetup once a month. So we would go to different parts of our district, and it was a pretty large district. And there was maybe 30 or so exchange students. And it was really nice to be able to know once a month we would meet up with them. And sometimes we would just go to other cities and hang out, or we did do a whole trip where we went down to Rome and then we stayed overnight. We did a whole trip where we went to Venice and stayed overnight. So being able to have those opportunities that were embedded within our program was really fun. And then this image here is on our lake, and this is another exchange student from another district. I'm sorry, she was another exchange student that was not in Lecco that we became friends with, who was able to come and see us sort of as a result of being connected with all the other Rotary Youth exchange students in our district. And then this is just more traveling. My parents were able to come and see me during my sister's spring break from school. So we went on a trip to Venice, and of course we're in a water taxi here. We took a gondola. And then on our trip to Germany, we went to the I can't say that, the Neuschwanstein Castle, and that is the castle that the Disneyland castle is based off of, which is just incredibly gorgeous, and it's up on this huge mountain. And then I made other friends in Lecco, and I'm still friends with everyone here in this picture too. These two women are from Italy themselves. One of them I became friends with on the bus that I took into school. We got on the same stop. And then my friend Rachel here too, she was with AFS, and she is from New Zealand. And funny story, I was in London with my sister, and we were walking around, and all of a sudden I see Rachel on the street in London. And this is in 2000, like maybe 2015 or so. So it was a while out, and I just look at Rachel, I'm like, what are you doing here? And she's looking at me like, what am I doing there? And I was there on a trip with my sister, and she's like, you're supposed to be in the States. I was like, I know, and you're supposed to be in New Zealand. But just how fun that we linked up with each other there. And I had no idea she was in London. She didn't know that I would be there either. But just really beautiful how we were able to connect. And then we hung out for the rest of the day, which is really fun. And I just really love all of those really beautiful connections. And sort of coming back to my story a little bit, the fun thing about being the Rotary Youth Exchange student was that as I was making all of these friends and sort of building all of these friendships, it became so much more important that I was from the United States and that I was sort of a new person that was in their town. They were so much more interested to hear what I had to say about Italy, what I had to say about Lecco, what I had to say about California, than they were about my hand. And again, because I didn't speak Italian, full-heartedly, I suppose, or speak it super well, that if they were talking about me or saying anything to me, I had no idea because it was in Italian. So that was such a really nice barrier that really helped me get out of my shell and really feel comfortable being able to network and meet people, and really helped sort of my own self-esteem and self-development, and really sort of stopping to prevent all of that sort of shame that I was feeling in that space. because it was just so much more important that these other things were happening. And similarly, when I returned back to the United States, people were so much more excited that I had just lived in Italy for a year and wanted to hear more about that experience, that I could share that bit, versus the hyper focus being on my hand and not knowing what to do with my hand or sort of how to interact with me on my hand. So that was a really neat way to then sort of begin my journey in my disability pride. And then, well, I suppose coming back to my Rotary, my youth exchange, I forgot to share my my fun, embarrassing moment that I had. My second family that I lived with, the Polvaras, they had a computer that had a wireless mouse to use to be able to interact with the computer, and the battery had died on the mouse. So I had gone into my host mother, who was working in the kitchen, you know, sort of tidying up after dinner, and I had said in Italian, I had translated, "The mouse doesn't go," which I said, "Il topo non va." And she looked at me and said topo, and then she jumped on top of a chair. And then my host sister came in the room and she was like, "Oh, there's a topo." So she jumps up on the chair, and the both of them are talking to each other about how to deal with this mouse, which I had translated over to topo. And then I looked at them and I was like, "No, let me go get it." And they're like, "No, no, 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 don't go get it. Don't go get it." And so then I had to go, then I like went and I brought the mouse in, and they're both like, "What are you doing, you crazy American?" And then I just showed that it was the mouse, and they're like, "Oh, the mouse doesn't go," because they don't translate the word mouse into mouse. Mouse is just mouse in English. And then they sort of laughed and came off their chairs. But I feel like that was my best language conversion story that I had, which was just really funny. And then that became a big story later on. They sort of then called me the mouse and would joke about it, which is really funny. Just as fun things to learn. And yeah, okay, cool. So then moving on, this is my involvement with Rotary since. I came back and was the president of my Interact Club, and then I was the secretary for Rotex for 3 years. And then I started going to the different conferences and events, which was really lovely. I was able to write a grant to have myself and then my two incoming leadership members, the president and the vice president, to be able to attend the conference in Toronto, Canada, to be able to learn how to rebuild our Rotaract club. It had kind of been floundering for a little bit. So I was able to come in and restructure it, and then wanted to help continue that leadership to our incoming presidents. So it was lovely for them to have come to the conference, as well as really trying to help encourage Rotaractors to become Rotarians. And that's sort of the hard part about having a university-based Rotaract club, is that then students are only involved in it during their school time, and then when they graduate, then they may not be connected to Rotary anymore. And we have such a high turnover of people. You can be in Rotaract until you're 30, but so many of the students then graduate and move on to other things, but don't sort of keep Rotary as part of it. So those are my stories. I did, when I was the president of my Rotaract club, my mother was the president of her host club the same year. So we did a combined service project, and I raised $1,000 to help fund a Play for All park that my mom was working on building with her club. And that is just an inclusive playground, which then ties deeply with my care for the people with disabilities, in that this is just a park that has wheelchair accessible swings, it has womb spaces, so children who maybe find sensory environments really overwhelming, that they can sort of go into these quieter spaces, and has different type of sensory and tactile things to be able to interact with, as well as a challenge ball field, which is for a challenge league, which is maybe students who or children that are not as freely able to run around a larger baseball field, but still can engage in baseball. So this is a smaller field that they can be able to use that sort of meets their needs. So our money went to building a Fenway Park, because I was at Boston University. So they had a Fenway Park and an AT&T Park that were sort of two models of the baseball fields that was happening in this playground. So that was really fun. And I think they're breaking ground on that this year, which is really great. So that is that. And then what is next for me? COVID really disrupted a lot of things in my life, as I'm sure COVID has disrupted maybe lots of things in your lives as well. I just got my license to practice occupational therapy on March 3rd, which was right before all the shutdowns happened. So I was starting onboarding paperwork to be able to be a therapist at Shriners Hospital in Philadelphia, which would be great because of all of my work with congenital hand differences. But then again, they're like, we can't bring on anybody new. We're not even sure if we can keep the people that we have. So I've applied to all 7 jobs that exist for occupational therapy in Philadelphia. So we'll see. And then, so as a result of that, I like projects and need something to fill my time. So I'm starting a YouTube channel just to help be another image of somebody with hand differences, so that people and parents who have hand differences now don't have to feel like they're the only ones that are happening, that they can be able to look to all of these other resources and be able to see that there are other people like them, so they don't exist in that sense of shame that I did for a long time. And then I'm competing for a cover girl contest for the Maxim magazine, which would be kind of fun. And then for my doctorate project for Boston University, I built a hand difference resource that is just collecting all of the research that we have right now on congenital hand differences and being able to put it in accessible format so that parents can interact with that. So looking at just anything that a parent could potentially want as a resource that we have in raising their kids. So how to talk to a teacher, what's an IEP, what is coping like, what are different surgical interventions, all of that different type of stuff. So I'm expanding that into a book form with another hand surgeon. And then looking at building, we're doing season 2 with Disarming Disability that just sort of covers disability related topics, just to sort of end the stigma on disability. And then I also I was performing in the aerial arts, but again, COVID kind of derailed a few of those things. So hopefully I'll be able to re-engage in that as well. Okay, so that is that.
Thanks so much for just really, yeah. If you can unmute yourself and round of applause, and then we'll take some questions. You know, I'm just chuckling. I'm like, okay, what else? Are you a concert pianist? Did you just pick up Mandarin last week? I mean, like, what else are you doing? You have done. You are so accomplished. You've done so much, and it's just it's really a treat to hear from you, and just kind of. I really personally gravitated towards, you know, your story of kind of adversity in childhood and kind of how you went from that happy, very young girl to more of a shy and reserved. And I mean, I think we can all on some personal level relate to some, you know, area in our life that we've been, you know, that we've hidden or what. I personally have a hearing loss. And I mean, I a lot of times just like smile, I just kind of go along with the party and, you know, hopefully nobody notices. But, you know, I think we all have something, whether it's bad or more social or whatever. And I just really love the positiveness and your enthusiasm, and really great presentation. So glad to have you here. And I'd love to open it up for some comments and questions.
I wanted to say, I loved your phrase, disability pride. I wrote it down. Is that your thing? Is that a phrase that I just haven't heard, or what? I just love it.
Yeah, that's you know, it's not a phrase that I came up with. There definitely is this disability movement that is trying to have people be proud of their disabilities, because there's so much heavy stigma against disability. But disability is the largest minority group that we have, where about 20% of people in the United States identify with having a disability. So that's something I do a lot of my work, is to really help change that and really have people be proud of what their disabilities are, just as we're proud to be any of these other features, you know, just like we're proud to be Rotarians, just like we're proud to be, you know, any of these other identities that we follow. So I learned all of that in graduate school. I was absolutely not proud of my hand. I was very uncomfortable talking about it, really up until grad school. There's moments where I was like, okay, we're going to put on our like limb different teacher hat, we'll be fine. But if people ask me questions when I'm buying apples, I'm like, no, don't talk to me. I just want to buy apples. So that's been something recently I've really taken on head on, and really feeling like I can have my hand out at the table and have it out and visible for people to see. And even as a flight attendant, when I first started working as a flight attendant, I would pour drinks on the table that we had, like our little cart, and then just hand everything out with my right hand. But I realized I'm so much faster if I just hand things to people with my left hand. But I had thought that people wouldn't want to interact with my hand. So I just wouldn't do that to try to like save them from the uncomfortableness of interacting with me. So then I was like, no, I'm so much faster and can get through this so much quicker if I just hand things out with my left hand and hand things out with my right hand. And that was a big change for me too, being able to do that, which has been really fun. So yes, disability pride, disability history. These are all things that we just don't have a lot of access to. They're not included in our history books. So that's something I've recently been plugged into, and there's a lot of work by a lot of really incredible people that are really trying to help connect everybody so that they are proud of their bodies.
Well, may I ask a question?
Please do.
Sure.
Thank you. Bravo, Sarah. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. I have two questions for you. One relates to your experience of life. How do you think your hand contributed to your resilience, your determination, creative problem solving? How have you been formed as a result, your personality been formed as a result of your hand difference? And then my second question is, you used the term disability, and I have started to hear the term differently abled or otherwise, other abled, and I think that we all want to be proper in terms of our use of language. And so I'd like you to give us some guidance, if you could, on what terminology we should use.
Absolutely. So to answer the first part, I think that having a hand difference has made me absolutely a creative problem solver. Every time I interact with something, I need to, especially if it's new. So if I'm rock climbing or if I'm doing any of these sort of activities, it's like, okay, so how are we going to do it? I need to kind of figure out, if I put my arm here, then can I do that? So there's lots of that type of very on the fly, like I'm a very kinesthetic learner. So trying to manipulate things to be able to learn that. So I do think that like problem solving and the creativity of being able to adapt and being open to what a variety of different adaptations can look like, not just physical adaptations, but if we have something, how can it be accessible for everyone that we're working with? And then I also think it made me such a kinder and more understanding and more empathetic person, just because I know the messages that people have said to me, and I just don't want anybody else to feel that way. And I know some friends that I have with limb differences are really into the humor. So if someone's like, what happened to your hand? And they're kind of like sassy back to that person, it's like, oh, I got bitten by a shark, and sort of create all these grandiose stories. But that just isn't my personality. I just didn't like that because I didn't want the other person to feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. And then I feel like a majority of what people are saying, similarly to the second question, is just because like we just haven't been exposed, we don't know, and it's not really their fault in that sort of sense. So I think that it made me such a kinder person, and really wanting to make sure that the energy that I give is good, positive, sort of like loving and, informative energy, and want people to feel included. So I remember even being in high school or any types of events and things that I would go to, I was very anxious being there, but I would also look for all the other people that were sitting by themselves and really just try to sit with them if they wanted it, just so that they know that they're not alone, because I knew how much it sucked to feel alone. So tried to connect with others in that space. And then to the second question, that is actually a very good question. There has been, I believe in the power of language, right? And the words that we use to describe people is how we view people ultimately, and how we sort of think about them in our heads. So I recently found out that the word disability was created by people who were disabled themselves, or identified with having a disability, out of the ADA Act that was passed in 1990. So with that, that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. Words that were used prior to that were handicapped. Disability leaders chose the word disability and wanted that to be put into legislature. So there's been a lot of sort of then that negative connotation with the word disability, but then almost like a second backlash of people with disabilities really taking on that word and really trying to change the stigma that's associated with disability. So being proud of the disability rather than replacing it with another word that then could just ultimately have the same stigma over time and then have to find a new word to then replace it with that same stigma. So right now, through what I'm sort of hearing by the disability leaders themselves is that disability is the word that is preferred. And then I personally in my occupational therapy program was exposed to or learned the person first language. So I tend to use that and sort of say people with disabilities or people who use wheelchairs or people who identify as schizophrenic versus, you know, a wheelchair bound person or a schizophrenic person or a disabled person. And then I find that people through the subgroups, so there's disability largely, but then people identify within the specific type of disability. So they may not say I am disabled, but they will say I'm an amputee, or I am I'm deaf, or I have cerebral palsy, or something maybe identify. That's sort of what I figured as they identify with a more specific category. But largely, I think really trying to change the narrative on disability itself. I know that there's some other strong voices that are really against the word disability, but I think that they just haven't found the disability pride yet. I feel they speak from their experience, but they maybe not have necessarily know the disability history or know sort of what the disability movement was happening in the 70s and in the 90s. Is sort of what I've collected all together. But it is sort of sticky and touchy, and there isn't a golden rule out that. So that's something that our community is trying to navigate on its own. But when I speak, I personally say people with disabilities. I talk about the disabled community or the disability community. All of those words are words I would use. I call myself someone who has a congenital indifference. I also use the word amputee because it's shorter. So I say like I'm an amputee aerial artist, and I sort of fall under amputee, even though like I didn't have something that then was acquired and sort of taken, but an amputee, it sort of falls under all of the other limb different, both upper and lower in that catch-all category. So I will use that term as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question? Vicki, you're unmuted, but you may just be unmuted.
Well, I don't know if I've been sitting here trying to decide if I was going to say anything, but we have this is my husband, Lee, and our son has a disability. He has autism, and it doesn't define everything about him. It's part of his makeup for sure. And sometimes when he was younger, we avoided using labels for him. And I think in some ways we may have done him a disservice by not being able for him to identify or plug himself in somewhere. I use it more freely now and say our son has autism. I try to avoid saying he is autistic. He just, I don't know. So sometimes I've wondered about the words and how much to identify and say and explain his behaviors to other people. Lee's just getting his high school photo off the wall. So anyway, we love our young man. But as a mother, when I heard you speaking, Sarah, I was thinking of all the ways that I have been overly protective of Evan and tried to protect him whenever possible from any kind of bullying and shaming and things that I couldn't keep totally from him, because later I find out it happens in the classroom and on the bus and all those other places too. So as a mother, it's really painful to find out that your beloved has been hurt that way. So I don't know where I was going to go with that. But anyway, so when you're talking about your acrobat work and your rock climbing, I'm like, oh my gosh, the overly protective mother is like, oh, that's just Evan. Are we proud parents or what?
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
So, I'm sure your mother encourages you, but also maybe is fearful. So your hand must be strong. Your left hand has a lot of strength in it to do that. So that's all.
And I use my elbow too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you've learned to adapt well. You're a real inspiration.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. And everything that you're saying is so real and valid. And a lot of parents, of course, we want the best lives for our children, right? We want them to live and be so happy and loved and all of those things. And to really lack the sort of like leadership or models or, you know, how can we do this effectively? I absolutely hear that. I read in my research for my doctorate project, I read everything I had access to about congenital limb differences. And one of the articles I came across was written in the mid-90s. I was born in 1990. So this is the climate that my parents were in. And it was an article that said something along the lines of like, the blight of the malformation is thus a crushing blow to everyone involved. And it's just like, really? Like, is it really though? Like, why are we using such strong language on this? And how can we really rather build a world that is more to build a world where people know what autism is and they are not surprised when they see behaviors that are sort of related to what the autism experience is, and to live in a world where we can have people hold on to things with their elbows and not be surprised by any of those things, and it just becomes part of our normal, because these are very real parts of human variation, right? Disability isn't new. Disability has existed for as long as humans have existed. So that's a lot of the work that I'm trying to do. I know I come from the limb different worlds, but that's just a lot of the work that I'm trying to do, is to just how can we better rewrite that narrative? How can we have more of a positive light on what disability is, and create a more understanding component to it too?
Have you ever read the poem? It's something, Welcome to Holland. It's talking about parents are anticipating the birth of their child, and it's like they're planning this wonderful trip to Italy. It actually talks about Italy in the poem, trip to Italy, and all these things they're going to learn, and all this romance and everything about Italy, and then all of a sudden you get off the plane and you are in Holland. Well, there's nothing wrong with Holland. You had planned to go to Italy, but now you're having to readjust everything and learn Dutch and learn, you know, that Holland has beautiful windmills and all these things. So it is an adjustment. It's like, you know, you still have this beautiful child, and it's just different. Anyway.
Yeah. I will look that up. I have not heard of that.
I can send it to you as well. If I have your email, or John does, I'll send it to him. Yeah.
Yes, Olga, we said Holland. Olga from Holland.
Oh yeah, right.
Netherlands. We're not supposed to say Holland anymore.
Well, the poem is a little old, perhaps, so it talks about Holland.
Yeah, the government has officially announced that it's now Netherlands, but I'm curious how often we'll still see Holland. That was a nice story. And thank you, Sarah. And you know which piece really hit home for me? It all depends on what bubble we're in too, I suppose. But when you said that you were almost hiding it or not really accepting your disability yourself, and then at some point you hit a tipping point and you said, you know what, I'm not going to hide it anymore. I'm going to use it and show it, and this is it. And I think it applies to so many things in life where we feel, we just don't accept it. And so that really hit home. Could you say more about that, or is there more to say about that?
Sure. Hiding is exhausting. Like I didn't realize how much mental and physical and emotional energy I was spending on just trying to hide myself. Or like, okay, so if they see it here, what am I going to say? If they do this, what am I going to say? Okay, like, are they going to say something? They're going to say something. They're going to say, I don't know, what are they going to say? Like, that just is so much. And to live a life free of that, where it doesn't bother me if anybody says anything, is such an incredibly just, oh my God, such a better place to live in. And finding that journey to sort of disability pride has taken an adventure, and a lot of it started here in Italy, because then I was able to talk about Italy. If people were then uncomfortable about my hand, and I'd be like, oh, well, I lived in Italy for a year. And that was a really cool thing. And then I could talk about that, and we didn't have to talk about my hand anymore. And then gradually through graduate schools, where I learned a lot of the disability theory and disability stigma. And I learned a lot of the disability models, and learned that there's the social model of disability. So there's nothing wrong with my hand, that this is an option of what hands can look like. It's not the majority, but sometimes hands look like these. But it's more the sort of social construct that it's a sort of society that's limiting and doesn't understand what it is. And then that's something that we can re-educate. There's nothing I can do to create a left hand, right? Like, we just don't have the medical technology to do that. So then why perseverate over wanting a normal left hand, whereas I can create a better, more understanding society by the work that I'm doing. So that was a lot of wake up moments. There's a lot of kind of points, and I was very resistant to it for a long time. But I'm really thankful to be in the space of freedom now, which is lovely.
It's awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks so much. We're about 15 minutes over. Any final questions? Sarah, thank you. Thank you so much. We in our e-club. Oh yeah, if we can take our, if you can unmute yourselves, and how about a round of applause?
Thank you so much.
Really just a delightful presentation. In our e-club, we actually end our meetings with the 4-way test as kind of a nice way to go out into the world and continue our days or evenings. So we can all say this along: the 4-way test of the things we think, say,
and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
I just really thank you for taking the time to be here with us. And, you know, I hope we get a chance to meet up sometime. We're at one of the exchange student conventions, or Rotary International Convention, or sometime when you're out in Minneapolis. For sure, look us up.
Please
Yes,
do.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
All right, and then just a reminder for everyone else for next week that Melanie is you have to it'll be a different link through the district, and you have to sign up for it ahead of time. So I'll make sure everyone gets that email. Very good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Next
Bye.
week. Bye, Sarah. Thanks again.
Thank you, Sarah.
Of course, of course.